Welcome to Saving Grace Torah Ministries. Today, we are discussing the tradition of the Christmas tree. While widely embraced today, it has its roots in ancient pagan practices and symbolism stretching across various cultures and beliefs. Although I recognize that the names Jesus and Christ are of pagan origin and not the true names of Yeshua the Messiah, I will use these terms intentionally and frequently throughout this video. This is because they are the names most commonly associated with the pagan holiday of Christmas. Since Yeshua's true names are not pagan, it would be inappropriate to associate them with a pagan holiday. Let's get started. The origins of the Christmas tree can be traced back to the Babylonian traditions surrounding Nimrod. After his death, somewhere around 2167 BCE, Nimrod's most infamous act was his leadership in constructing the Tower of Babel, as we read in Genesis 11:4. This tower symbolized humanity's attempt to reach the heavens and make a name for themselves apart from Elohim. Babel became a center of rebellion, with Nimrod glorified as its leader. The tower and the city were expressions of self-worship and rejection of Yahweh's authority. Semiramis, Nimrod's wife and mother, declared him a god, lowercase g. She claimed to have witnessed a full-grown evergreen tree spring from the roots of a dead tree stump, symbolizing Nimrod's rebirth and immortality. On the anniversary of his birth, December the 25th, the time of the winter solstice, it was believed that Nimrod would visit the evergreen tree and leave gifts beneath it. This concept of the evergreen as a symbol of eternal life was later mirrored in various cultures. During the Roman festival of Saturnalia, trees were adorned with metal decorations, honoring Saturn, the god of agriculture. Similarly, the Druids, Celts, and Vikings decorated their homes with evergreen branches, believing they symbolized life, fertility, and protection from wicked spirits. For the Egyptians, green palm rushes represented the triumph of life over death and were prominently displayed during winter solstice celebrations. The Bible frequently associates sacred trees with idolatry and pagan worship. In 2 Kings chapter 18 and verse 4, King Hezekiah destroyed the Asherah poles, sacred wooden symbols of the pagan Canaanite fertility goddess Asherah. Similarly, Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 3 and 4 warns against practices that resemble the modern Christmas tree tradition. It says, "They cut down a tree from the forest. They adorn it with silver and gold. They fasten it with nails and hammers so that it will not topple." These passages highlight the dangers of adopting traditions that originated in idolatry. The physical act of decorating and placing gifts beneath the tree often involves bowing down, a gesture that mimics ancient acts of worship toward sacred objects. By the Middle Ages, the paradise tree emerged in Europe as a symbol of man's fall and redemption. Decorated with apples to signify sin and wafers to represent salvation through Christ, this tree was used in theatrical plays during the Feast of Adam and Eve. However, its origins still echo pagan traditions. The transition of the Christmas tree into Christian homes was solidified in the 16th century when Martin Luther, the leader of the Protestant Reformation, who spawned countless denominations that viewed obedience to the Torah, which they dismiss as law-keeping, as legalism, and claim it contradicts the message of grace in the Bible, is said to have introduced the practice of lighting trees with candles inspired by the sight of stars shining through the branches of evergreens. Despite this, the theological implications of the tree's symbolism remain rooted in its pagan origins. Even today, some Christmas tree practices have controversial elements. The relatively recent trend of hanging Christmas trees upside down is not as novel as it appears. During the Middle Ages, some Europeans hung trees from ceilings to represent the false doctrine of the Holy Trinity. While this tradition may have Christian connotations, modern interpretations of the inverted tree are often viewed as disrespectful to sacred practices. Interestingly, the evergreen tree was also a symbol of Attis, an agricultural deity from Asia Minor. Attis, who was celebrated on December 25th, was believed to die and resurrect, making the pine tree an emblem of his rebirth. This connection adds another layer of pagan influence to the practice of using evergreens as part of holiday traditions. No matter how much the Christmas tree is Christianized, whether by claiming it represents Christ's eternal life or using it as a symbol of celebration, the truth remains. Its origins are deeply tied to paganism. The act of bowing to retrieve gifts placed beneath the tree or adorning it with lights and ornaments carries echoes of ancient pagan rituals, raising questions about its place in biblical worship. As believers, it is worth reflecting on whether such practices align with biblical teachings or whether they risk adopting customs the Bible warns against. The evergreen tree, much like other aspects of Christmas, challenges us to discern between tradition and scriptural truth. The Bible is clear in its warnings about adopting pagan customs in worship. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 30 to 31 says, "Do not inquire after their gods, saying, 'How did these nations serve their gods?' I also will do likewise. You shall not worship Yahweh your Elohim in that way." Paul echoes this in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 to 17. "What fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? Come out from among them and be separate, says Yahweh, and do not touch what is unclean, and I shall receive you." Even with good intentions, celebrating traditions rooted in idolatry is not pleasing to Elohim. As Mark chapter 7, verse 6 to 7 says, "This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." Thanks for watching. Leave your comments in the chat. Peace, blessings, and joy from Dr. Christopher Rogers.